The fairy tales we were tucked into bed with aren't always sugar and stardust. Many of them wear bright colors to hide bruises. And Hansel and Gretel is one of the brightest and the darkest. On the surface, it's a cozy campfire yarn about two clever kids. Underneath, it's a survival story about abandonment, hunger, murder, and cannibalism. And here's the twist. Earlier tellings were even bleaker. Tonight, we'll peel back those layers, following the tale from its gingerbread facade to the charred bones beneath, and trace the real histories that may have shaped it. Brace yourself. You may never hear this story the same way again. Welcome back, Darklings. Before we descend into the roots, let's revisit the branch we all recognize, the familiar version most of us met first. Once, at the wooded edge of a village where daylight thinned into shadows, a poor woodcutter lived with his two children, Hansel and Gretel, and their cold-eyed stepmother. The cupboard echoed. Then a famine struck, stretching hunger over days and nights like a canvas of thorns. One whispering midnight, the stepmother leaned toward the woodcutter and said the thing no parent wants to hear. "We can't feed them. Take them deep into the forest. Leave them. It's the only way we survive." Hansel, quick as a spark, overheard. Gretel trembled. He squeezed her hand. "I have a plan," and slipped outside to pocket small white pebbles that shone like fallen moons. At dawn, as their parents led them into the trees, Hansel let the stones fall behind him, one by one, sowing a path of light through the dark. In a clearing, they were abandoned with soft promises that curdled into silence. Night rose. Moonlight drew a dotted line on the forest floor, and the children followed it home. Their return didn't melt the stepmother's heart. It hardened it. "Tomorrow farther," she snapped. That night Hansel tried to gather more pebbles, but the door was locked. All he could get in the morning was a thumb of bread. As they walked, he pinched the loaf into crumbs and let them trickle behind. Another bright trail, he hoped. But the forest has its own hungry mouths. Birds came. By sunset, the path had been eaten. Lost at last, they wandered until wonder replaced fear. A house made of food, walls like loaves, windows glazed with sugar, a roof shingled in gingerbread. Starving, the children tore into it, giggling between mouthfuls. Then the door creaked. An old woman, welcoming as a candle in a cottage window, called them in. There were steaming bowls, soft beds, and a smile that didn't reach the eyes. She was a witch. Morning found Hansel behind iron bars and Gretel in an apron. Each day the witch pinched and prodded, demanding Hansel stick out his finger so she could judge his fat. He offered a thin bone instead. Her eyes were poor, her patience worse. At last she hissed, "Enough!" She stoked the oven, hot as August, and snapped to Gretel, "Crawl in and check if it's ready." Gretel blinked, feigning confusion. "How? Like this?" The witch bent forward, head and shoulders inside the iron grin of the oven. Gretel shoved. The door slammed. Fire told the rest of the story. She freed Hansel. Together they opened chests the witch had hoarded. Gold coins, jewels, stones that promised their hunger would end. Pockets glittering, they found their way home. The stepmother had died. The father, gray with regret, embraced them. With the witch's treasure they ate, and kept eating, and the tale tied itself off with the soft bow of happily ever after. This version, Candy House, Bone Trick of Injustice, is the one the Brothers Grimm printed in 1812. Jacob and Wilhelm weren't crafting bedtime stories in the modern sense. They were collectors and polishers of folk material, preserving German voices at a time when French fashion and power pressed across Europe. Their children's and household tales were cultural preservation first, nursery fare second. Hansel and Gretel, as the Grimms gave it to us, likely condensed and refined strands that had been told around fires and tables for centuries. Where do those strands come from? Start in the early 1300s. Between 1314 and 1322, Europe staggered through the Great Famine. Unseasonal rains rotted fields. Summers ran cold, winters bit long. Hay refused to dry. Livestock sickened and died. Salt, medieval refrigeration, grew scarce because brine wouldn't evaporate under sullen skies. Grain prices soared. Bread turned into a luxury instead of a staple. When hunger sits at the table too long, crimes sprout. Rumors of cannibalism surface where nothing else will grow. That is the air ancient listeners breathed. The kind of air that makes stories about abandoned children, empty cupboards, and predatory strangers feel less like fantasy and more like weather. The motif isn't unique to this tale. In England, the ballad Babes in the Wood appeared in 1595, over 2 centuries before the Grimms. 2 orphan children are entrusted to an uncle who prefers inheritance to honesty. He hires killers who lose their nerve and abandon the children in a green maze. After days of wandering, the little ones lie down beneath an oak and never rise again. In a final tenderness, a robin covers their bodies with leaves. It's a lullaby that never lets you sleep. Legend roots the story in Norfolk. A guardian who claimed his dead brother's house. A woodland called Wayland, remembered by many as Wailing Wood. Village whispers that something unspeakable happened out there beneath the branches. Whether each detail is provable isn't the point. Grief remembers itself as geography. Folktales pin sorrow to maps so we cannot look away. The wicked uncle shape casts a longer shadow. In 1483, 2 royal boys were placed in the Tower of London by their uncle. They vanished. History and rumor shake hands across centuries, and a pattern emerges. Children made vulnerable by hunger, greed, or politics. Guardians turning into wolves. A century after Babes in the Wood, Charles Perrault published Hop o' My Thumb in 1697. This time, the woodcutter's brood has 7 sons and 2 little bred. The smallest boy overhears his parents' plan and scatters white pebbles to mark the way home. The next attempt, with only breadcrumbs to spare, ends as you'd expect. The birds do housekeeping and the path is gone. The boys find shelter at a house belonging to an ogre. His wife tries to shield them, but night brings wine, confusion, and a trick. Hop o' My Thumb swaps the gold crowns on the ogre's sleeping daughters with the nightcaps on his brothers. When the ogre staggers in to do murder in the dark, he feels for caps, mistakes his own children for strangers, and kills them. At dawn, the boys flee. The ogre chases them in 7-league boots, collapsing in exhaustion. The clever boy steals the boots, returns to the ogre's wife in disguise, and talks her out of treasure to ransom her husband. The brothers go home rich. Hear the familiar bones? Eavesdropped abandonment. A trail that fails. Children turning cunning. A man-eater at the edge of the map. If Hansel and Gretel is a German echo, Hop o' My Thumb is the French echo chamber. But the image no one forgets, the gingerbread cottage, seems uniquely sharpened in the grim telling. Where did it come from? Medieval imagination dreamed of Cockaigne, a topsy-turvy paradise where rivers ran with wine, roast geese flew to your plate, and houses were literally made of cake. In times of famine, Cockaigne was both a joke and a prayer. It promised plenty while mocking work, a fantasy of endless feasting with a sour aftertaste. Indulgence can be a trap. Put that dream beside starving children who stumble onto a house of sweets and you get exactly the moral hazard the Grimms cooked into the tale. Hunger makes traps look like miracles. France offers another braid of story. Madame d'Aulnoy's Finette Cendrillon. Think Cinderella with a survival knife. A royal family loses its wealth. The parents decide to abandon their 3 daughters. A fairy godmother intervenes. First with a magic thread tied to the door so the girls can find their way home. Then with a bag of ashes to sprinkle as a trail. Finette is warned to save herself, but she wastes mercy on her cruel sisters, guiding them back anyway. The 3rd time, she's on her own. The trail is eaten. The forest swallows them. They stumble on an ogre's house. Finette doesn't wait to be rescued. She tricks the ogre to the oven's mouth and burns him to ash. Then she lulls the ogress with promises of grooming and a grand match, only to turn the comb into a blade and end that threat, too. Dressed in plundered finery, the sisters strut into town. A lost slipper seals a princely marriage. If Gretel's push is the famous oven turn, Finette's is the rehearsal that shows how it's done. Cross south to Italy and you'll hear Giovanni Battista Basile's Nanillo and Nanella, printed nearly 180 years before the Grimms. A stepmother whispers, a father obeys. Ashes and bran serve as trails. One usable, the next devoured. The children are separated. One is sheltered by a prince, the other shipwrecked into hardship before a reunion and a reckoning. The specifics shift, but the compass points don't. Hunger, abandonment, cunning, transformation, homecoming. Certain tools keep repeating like charms. Trails, pebbles, ashes, crumbs, thread. Promise that no path is truly lost if you leave signs for your future self. Greek myth holds a mirror. Theseus enters the labyrinth with a ball of thread to find his way back after killing the Minotaur. Folklore across borders says survival is a kind of map-making. Birds flutter in and out, too. They are helpers and hazards. A robin lays a leaf shroud over innocent bodies. Other birds gobble the crumbs that were meant to be lifelines. Their chorus and fate at once. One of the starkest variations lives in Romanian lore. A widower remarries, and the new wife seethes at the children who divide her husband's love. She bullies the father into dragging the boy and girl into the forest. The daughter senses the trap and scatters ashes so they can find their way home, to the stepmother's fury. The second plan is worse. While the father is away, the stepmother kills the boy and forces the girl to cook him for their father's supper. The sister, broken-hearted, hides her brother's heart in the hollow of a tree, serves the dish, and refuses to eat. Next day, from that hollow, a small dark bird emerges and sings, "Cuckoo! My sister has cooked me, my father has eaten me, but I am free." The stepmother hurls a lump of salt at the bird. It misses. Fate does not. The salt strikes her own skull and kills her. Listen to that alongside the witch who plans to roast Hansel, and you hear the same drumbeat. In some versions, the monster is a stranger. In others, she is family. Either way, the tale warns. Those who prey upon the young are undone by their own violence. By the time the brothers Grimm edited their famous collection, they were working like careful gardeners. They clipped, grafted, and pruned so a tangled thicket of oral tradition could bloom in print. They didn't invent Hansel and Gretel from nothing. They tuned its music. They pushed the children's cleverness to the front, made the sugar house unforgettable, heightened the oven's justice, and polished a moral listeners could hold. Wit and courage beat hunger and cruelty. Yet the soil is anything but neat. The great famine writes itself into the first act. Economic envy, the uncle stealing inheritance, the stepmother resenting mouths to feed, haunts the middle. Superstitions and fantasies, Cocaine's sugared skyline, decorate the third act. And in culture after culture, the ending burns. The child meant to be cooked learns to cook the cook. And then there's the sugar. Only folklore could turn a cottage into cake and make that appetizing and terrifying at the same time. The house is need made visible. It's wish fulfillment with teeth. In famine, the child dreams. If only the walls were bread. Folklore answers, fine, but beware who baked them. Desire can be a mask on the face of danger. Why does this story keep walking back into our kitchens? Because it names fears that never go extinct. Abandonment, scarcity, manipulators who smile at the door. Hansel and Gretel says, leave a trail. Says, when the door is locked, improvise. Says, monsters are patient, but you can be clever. It speaks to sibling loyalty, two children saving each other when the adults fail them. The power flip is part of the magnetism. Children, least powerful in their home, gain agency through observation and nerve. The oven scene satisfies precisely because it inverts the script. Gretel, forced into servitude, pretends ignorance long enough to lure her captor's head toward the flames. It is a triumph not of strength but of timing. Even the treasure at the end reads symbolic. Resources finally flowing toward those who were denied them. Once you start looking, the forest crowds with cousins. A slipper that leads to a prince after an ogre meets the oven. 7-league boots chasing a pack of brothers. A ball of thread leading out of a labyrinth. 2 children covered with leaves by a kindly bird. All of them orbit the same star. The threat of being lost and the craving to be found, and the end. Hansel and Gretel is a cultural scrapbook. You can flip the pages. A bone held out through iron bars. A robin laying a funeral shroud of leaves. crowns swapped in the dark, a pocket full of pebbles shining like rescued moons, a cottage iced with sugar that tastes like danger, an oven door slamming like a verdict. These pictures survive not because they're gentle, but because they tell the truth about hard times in a way children can carry and adults can recognize. So, what surprised you most? The famine undercurrent? The ogre-burning heroines and crown-swapping tricksters? The Norfolk whispers? Or the cuckoo rising from a hollow tree? Tell me in the comments which version you grew up with, and which image won't leave your head tonight. If dark folklore is your kind of bedtime story, there's a whole shelf waiting. Tap the playlist for more origins, more echoes, more secrets hiding in plain sight. Until next time, leave a trail, keep your wits, and never trust a house that smells like dessert.